Welcome to another deep dive, everybody. Today we're going to be tackling kind of a difficult question.
Yeah.
Which is, why did people support the Nazis? It's a really dark chapter in history.
Absolutely.
It's really easy to look back and judge.
Sure.
But in order to really learn from it, we kind of need to understand the complexities of the time.
Yeah, I think that's critical.
And so we're going to be drawing primarily from a historical document called Nazi Germany, Topic 2, Rise of Hitler.pdf.
Okay.
To kind of guide our exploration.
Sounds good.
And the goal is not to justify or condone anything.
No.
But really just try to analyze the factors that, made the Nazi Party, appealing to a significant portion of the German population.
That's right. And I think it's important to remember that we're not trying to excuse the horrors that followed,
right.
But, really trying to understand the conditions that allow these types of movements to take root.
For sure.
And I think a good place to start is to kind of understand the state of Germany after World War I.
Okay, so paint a picture for me. What was life like for the average German citizen, in those years after World War I?
Well, you got to imagine a nation that's grappling with defeat. They're saddled with these crippling war reparations.
Right.
And they're struggling to establish a new democratic system.
Right.
And this was the reality of the Weimar Republic.
Okay.
It was a period of immense instability, both politically and economically.
Yeah, so people were feeling lost and disillusioned, right?
Absolutely.
That makes sense, but how did that open the door for someone like Hitler?
Well, the Weimar Republic, despite its good intentions, was plagued by weaknesses.
Okay.
So, for example, Article 48 of the Weimar Constitution allowed the president to rule by decree in times of emergency.
Oh, wow.
And this was used so frequently that it actually undermined the very democracy it was meant to protect.
Interesting.
So it created the sense that the government was ineffective and even perhaps illegitimate.
Oh, so they were worried about a dictator,
Yeah.
But they also kind of wanted a strong leader to fix things.
Yeah. It was a very tough position to be in.
That's a dangerous paradox.
It was fueled by this longing for stability and order.
Right.
And this longing was only intensified by events like the French occupation of the Ruhr in 1923.
Oh, yeah.
So you have to imagine your industrial heartland being occupied by a foreign power.
Right.
And this fueled resentment and this feeling of national humiliation.
Yeah. Nobody wants to feel that way.
No. And you combine that with violent uprisings from both the far left and the far right.
Okay.
And you have a recipe for widespread discontent.
That's a lot to deal with. And I know the Great Depression hit Germany particularly hard.
Yes, it was a turning point.
So tell me about that.
The economic devastation of the Great Depression was unlike anything else. I mean, unemployment skyrocketed with over 6 million Germans out of work by 1932.
Wow.
People were losing their homes, their savings, their sense of hope.
Yeah.
And that's where Hitler and the Nazis stepped in.
Oh, boy.
They capitalized on this despair with promises of work and food.
So they were offering solutions at a time when people were desperate for anything that resembled hope.
Exactly. Hitler was a master manipulator. He understood the power of simple, emotionally charged messages.
Right.
And he offered scapegoats, often Jewish people, for Germany's problems.
Wow.
He promised to restore the nation to its former glory.
I mean, that sounds pretty enticing to a lot of people.
Absolutely. And it was effective.
Yeah. Well, speaking of these messages,
Yeah.
I've heard about these massive rallies that the Nazis held.
Right.
What was the strategy behind those?
Oh, they were far more than just a show of force.
Okay.
Rallies like those staged during the Hitler over Germany campaign, these were carefully orchestrated theatrical productions.
Wow. So really a show?
It was a show, and I think you could argue that it's, one of the early examples of political branding and mass manipulation.
Interesting.
Through these rallies, Hitler was able to project an image of himself as this, dynamic, tireless leader that was dedicated to the German people.
But people bought it.
A lot of people did, yeah.
It's hard to believe.
And you also have to remember the imagery was carefully crafted to evoke this sense of strength and order.
Oh, okay.
You had the SA, which was the Nazi paramilitary group marching in their sharp uniforms,
Right.
projecting this image of discipline and unity
Okay.
at a time when people were craving both of those things.
Wow. They just wanted some peace and some stability.
They wanted to get back on track.
Exactly.
And those visuals must have been incredibly powerful, especially when you contrast it with the chaos and uncertainty of the Weimar Republic.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So it's understandable why people were drawn to that.
So it sounds almost cult-like, the way they were able to create this aura around Hitler and the Nazi Party.
Yeah, it was a potent mix of charisma propaganda and this exploitation of, deep-seated fears and anxieties.
For sure.
But I think to really grasp the extent of their influence, we need to look beyond the rallies.
Okay.
And kind of dive into the darker side of their rise to power.
Yeah, that's a good point. We'll have to explore that further in our next deep dive.
Absolutely.
But for now, thanks for taking us on this journey so far.
My pleasure. We've been talking about, all these different factors, that made Hitler's message, resonate with a nation that was yearning for stability and strength.
Right.
But, how did he and the Nazi Party actually solidify their power?
Yeah.
I mean, you can't just, hold rallies and suddenly become a dictator.
Right, that's what I'm really curious about. Are the events that, actually shifted that balance of power?
Sure.
What were some of the key turning points that allowed the Nazis to kind of consolidate their control?
Well, one event that really stands out is the Reichstag fire in 1933.
Oh, yeah?
The burning of the German parliament building. This was a shock to the nation.
Yeah.
And the Nazis really capitalized on the fear and uncertainty surrounding it.
Okay, so how did they actually use this event to their advantage?
Well, while a Dutch communist, Marinus van der Lubbe, was arrested for the arson,
Okay.
the Nazis seized the opportunity to kind of paint this broader picture
Okay.
of a communist conspiracy to overthrow the government.
Oh.
And they used this narrative to justify passing the Reichstag fire decree,
Okay.
which effectively suspended civil liberties.
So they used this event, which, they may have even had a hand in orchestrating,
Potentially, yeah.
to basically grab more power.
Yeah, it was a shrewd move.
That's terrifying.
It was ruthless, and the decree allowed them to arrest political opponents, especially communists, without due process.
Oh, wow.
And so it really created this climate of fear
Oh,
and silenced dissent, which, paved the way for further consolidation of Nazi power.
and this kind of paved the way for the Enabling Act, right?
Exactly.
The one that basically handed Hitler dictatorial powers.
Precisely.
I mean, it's crazy how quickly things escalated.
Yeah, the Enabling Act was passed just a few months after the Reichstag fire, and it was basically this legal maneuver that allowed Hitler to enact laws without the approval of the Reichstag.
And that was it for German democracy?
Yeah, pretty much.
I mean, that's insane.
And what's really chilling is that they achieved this through legal means.
Yeah, they manipulated the system from within.
They did.
It makes you wonder how many people saw the writing on the wall,
Sure.
knew what was happening, but felt powerless to stop it.
Yeah, I'm sure there were many.
But the Nazis didn't just rely on legal maneuvering, did they?
No, they didn't.
I remember reading about the Night of the Long Knives,
Yeah.
which seemed pretty brutal.
It was a chilling example of how the Nazis used violence to eliminate anyone they perceived as a threat.
Yeah.
So Hitler purged potential rivals within his own party.
Oh, wow. So he wasn't afraid to turn on his own people.
No, he wasn't.
That's ruthless.
Including Ernst Röhm, the leader of the SA.
Wow.
And this really demonstrated the lengths to which he would go to consolidate his power
Right.
and eliminate any potential challenge to his leadership.
So the message was clear.
The message is clear. Dissent would not be tolerated.
Yeah. You better just keep quiet.
And it's important to note that the violence wasn't random.
Okay.
It was targeted and calculated.
Yeah, for sure. So you have this combination of, legal maneuvering and brute force to silence opposition.
Right.
But how did they shape public perception during this time?
Well, that's where Joseph Goebbels comes in.
Okay.
The minister of propaganda.
Right.
He was a master at controlling the narrative.
Okay.
He used every tool at his disposal, radio, newspapers, film,
Right.
to create this cult of personality around Hitler
Mm-hmm.
and demonize anyone who opposed the Nazi regime.
So they flooded the media with pro-Nazi messages
Exactly.
and silenced any dissenting voices.
They shut it down.
It's like a textbook example of how propaganda can be used to manipulate an entire nation.
It is, and it's a sobering reminder of how easily truth can be distorted when information is controlled.
Right.
And they also went beyond just controlling the media.
Oh, really?
They infiltrated every aspect of daily life.
Wow.
They abolished trade unions,
Okay.
taking away workers' ability to organize.
Oh, wow.
They controlled education, indoctrinating the youth with Nazi ideology.
Right?
They even had book burnings publicly destroying works deemed un-German.
Wow, they were thorough,
Their goal was total control.
and they pretty much achieved it.
They did, and with the death of President Hindenburg in 1934,
Okay.
Hitler seized the opportunity to merge the roles of chancellor and president.
Oh, wow.
making him the undisputed dictator of Germany.
It's incredible and terrifying how they were able to transform Germany
Yeah.
from, a fledgling democracy into a totalitarian state in such a short period of time.
Absolutely.
But we still haven't fully answered the question of why so many people went along with it.
Right.
Like, what specific promises resonated with different groups?
Yeah, that's a good point. And that's where we'll pick up in the final part of our deep dive. We'll look at how the Nazis appealed to farmers, the middle class, and those who yearn for national restoration.
All right. Sounds good.
Mm-hmm.
I'm looking forward to it. We've explored, the political maneuvering.
Right.
And the chilling tactics the Nazis used to consolidate their power.
Yeah.
But it still begs the question.
Sure.
Why did so many everyday Germans support them?
Mm-hmm.
Was it all just fear and intimidation?
Well, I think fear definitely played a role.
Okay.
But it wasn't the whole story.
Okay.
The Nazis were incredibly strategic in tailoring their message to appeal to different segments of society.
Okay.
They offered something for everyone, tapping into pre-existing anxieties and aspirations.
So it was a divide and conquer strategy, essentially.
In a way, yes.
Okay.
Let's take farmers, for example.
Right.
They were really struggling during the Depression, facing bankruptcy and foreclosures.
Right.
And, the Nazis swooped in and promised to protect them from, what they called evil Jewish banks. And they ensured that they'd get a fair price for their crops.
Okay.
So it was this very simple, emotionally powerful message
Yeah.
that resonated with a group that was really desperate for economic relief.
So they were capitalizing on existing, economic anxieties.
Right.
And prejudices to gain support.
Absolutely.
It's almost like a political bait and switch.
Yeah, you could say that.
What about the middle class?
Sure.
How did the Nazis appeal to them?
Well, the middle class was also feeling the squeeze of the economic downturn. Inflation had eroded their savings,
Right.
and they were terrified of losing their social status.
Yeah.
And so the Nazis played on these fears,
Okay.
again, scapegoating Jewish people in the banking industry as the cause of their economic woes.
So the same tactic is applied to a different group's anxieties,
Different group, different fears.
offering a scapegoat and a promise to restore them to their former glory.
Exactly.
And I'm guessing this ties into the broader theme of national pride that the Nazis were so good at exploiting.
Yeah, remember, Germany had been humiliated after World War I.
Mm-hmm.
The Treaty of Versailles had imposed these, very harsh penalties.
Right.
And many Germans felt betrayed by their own leaders.
For sure.
And Hitler constantly railed against the treaty, calling it a diktat forced upon them.
Okay.
And he promised to overturn its terms, rearm Germany, and make it a great power again.
That must have been a powerful message
It was.
for those who had served in the war or lost loved ones.
Especially.
A chance to reclaim their national identity and pride.
Yeah, it was a chance to heal.
Yeah, it's starting to become clear how they were able to appeal to such a broad spectrum of people.
Yeah, it was this potent mix of economic promises,
Right.
targeted scapegoating,
Mm-hmm.
and this deeply resonant appeal to national revival.
Yeah.
And I think it's a reminder that, even in the face of extremism, people's motivations can be complex and multifaceted.
It's so easy to judge in hindsight, but you have to consider the circumstances these people were facing.
Right.
They were desperate for solutions,
They were.
and the Nazis presented themselves as having all the answers.
And that's a crucial lesson I think we can apply today.
Oh, okay. How so?
We have to remain vigilant in recognizing and addressing the underlying conditions that allow extremism to flourish.
Okay.
Things like economic hardship, social division, political instability.
Yeah.
If we ignore these issues, we risk repeating the mistakes of the past.
So it's not just about condemning the Nazis. It's
Right.
about understanding the factors that allowed them to rise to power
That's right.
and learning from those mistakes.
Exactly. We need to be wary of anyone who seeks to exploit our fears and prejudices.
Yeah.
And we must actively work to create a more just and equitable society where extremism has no fertile ground to take root.
Well, that's a sobering but crucial takeaway.
I agree.
Thanks for taking us on this deep dive into such a complex and disturbing chapter of history.
Yeah, of course.
It's given us a lot to think about.
My pleasure.